I was polishing the chrome trim on my restored 1965 Ford F-100 when the trouble began. The truck gleamed under the sun like a rolling mirror, every curve reflecting the quiet neighborhood around me. It had taken me 5 years, countless weekends, and more busted knuckles than I could count to bring the old beast back to life. The engine purred like a content lion, and the interior smelled of polished leather and nostalgia. It was more than a vehicle. It was a legacy. My father worked on that truck before I was even born, and I had promised myself I would never let it fall into the wrong hands. Unfortunately, the wrong hands lived exactly 2 blocks away. The local HOA was infamous, led by a group of self-appointed rule enforcers who acted more like suburban bounty hunters than volunteers. Their unofficial leader, a Karen named Valerie, had been trying to find excuses to bother me ever since I moved in. She hated that I never joined the HOA. I bought land just outside their boundary, yet somehow the very existence of my house offended her. She had complained about my porch lights being too warm. She had filed noise complaints about the sound of me hammering the truck during restoration. She had even tried to fine me for unsightly vehicular activity, whatever that meant. But this time, she brought backup. When I heard tires crunching on gravel, I turned around and froze. 2 black and white SUVs rolled up my driveway like they were about to raid a drug den. They were not city police. I knew that immediately. Their uniforms were slightly off. Their badges were cheap metal plates. Their belts were mismatched. And their posture screamed authority without training. The HOA had created its own security force. I almost laughed, until one of them placed a hand on his holster. "Sir," the tallest one said, puffing out his chest, "we have received reports that this vehicle is illegally stored on HOA property." I slowly looked down at my own driveway, then back at him. "This is my land." He lifted a clipboard as if it proved something. "According to our records, your driveway falls under the extended maintenance jurisdiction of the Lakeside HOA. There it was, their new phrase of the month. They kept inventing these fictional rules whenever they wanted to control something. But this one was so ridiculous I had to shake my head. "That is not real," I said. "Nothing belonging to your HOA extends onto my property." Karen herself stepped forward from behind the officers. Her permanently narrowed eyes, stiff posture, and overly perfect hair gave her the look of someone who was always 2 seconds away from filing a complaint. "We have the right," she snapped, "to seize property that violates HOA standards. And that truck is an eyesore." My jaw tightened. "It is a classic vehicle." "It is old," she countered. "Old equals ugly. Ugly equals lowering property values." I stared at her. "You do not get to rewrite reality." But she ignored me and waved to the officers. "Impound it." The taller officer nodded to the other. "Prepare the tow chain." They actually walked toward my truck. My pulse thudded in my ears. I felt the familiar rush of heat building under my skin, not fear, but anger. These people thought they could storm onto private land, intimidate a homeowner, and steal his property under fake authority. "Stop," I commanded. Both men turned toward me. One smirked. Karen folded her arms. I stepped toward them slowly, deliberately, like a man done playing along. "Before you lay a single finger on that truck, you need to understand something." I pulled my leather wallet from my back pocket, opened it, and held up the item I rarely displayed unless absolutely necessary. A federal badge glinted in the sunlight. The taller officer blinked. The other officer froze. Karen's confident smirk collapsed into confusion, then panic. I kept my voice calm. "I work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Which means I know exactly how many laws you just tried to break." The officers suddenly stood straighter, unsure whether to speak or run. I saw their fake badges trembling slightly on their chests. Karen sputtered, "That cannot be real." Everything about your operation is illegal, I said. Impersonating law enforcement. Attempting unlawful seizure of private property. Trespassing. Harassment. Abuse of authority. Shall I continue? The shorter officer took a step back. Ma'am. Maybe we should leave. But Karen's pride outweighed her survival instinct. He is lying. Nobody brings an FBI badge to a neighborhood dispute. I locked eyes with her. I do. Especially when someone tries to steal my father's truck. The taller officer swallowed hard. Sir. Please. Just tell us what to do. I clipped the badge back into my wallet. You are going to remove yourselves from my property. Then you are going to explain to local authorities why you were wearing fake law enforcement uniforms. Karen gasped. This is harassment. No, I said. This is accountability. Her face twisted. She turned to run toward her car, but her fake officers remained frozen, waiting for permission to leave. I stood firm, watching as panic cracked through their bravado. For the first time since moving here, I was not the one being cornered. They were. And I planned to make sure this incident was only the beginning of their downfall. The next morning began in the quietest way possible, a soft breeze rattling the dry oak leaves near the barn and the far-off hum of someone's lawn mower. I was in the shop early, reorganizing tools and checking the bolt patterns on the axle I planned to install. My vintage truck, my pride and joy, sat up on the lift like a patient waiting for surgery. I had spent months gathering rare parts, polishing chrome, and restoring each bolt with the kind of dedication only true mechanics understand. Then I heard it, an aggressive pounding on the workshop door. Not a friendly knock. Not a neighborly greeting. A demand. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked over. The moment I opened the door, my peaceful morning evaporated. Two men stood outside wearing dark blue uniforms with shiny badges that definitely looked official, but not in the way real law enforcement looked. Their patches read HOA Enforcement Division. The logo looked homemade, the badges were slightly crooked, and the belts. Well, one guy had his holster on backward. That alone said enough. The taller one stepped forward, puffing his chest like a rooster trying to impress a flock. Morning, he barked. We received reports of an unauthorized vehicle being stored on community land. I raised a brow. Community land? This is my property. He ignored that and pulled out a clipboard. We're here to seize the vehicle pending HOA review. Failure to comply will result in immediate penalties and potential arrest. Arrest. For working on my own truck. On my own land. At 8 in the morning. I let out a slow sigh through my nose. You sure you gentlemen are in the right place? The shorter officer, round, red-faced, and breathing like had sprinted from Karen's front porch, stepped forward. We don't make mistakes, he wheezed. We have full authority from the homeowners association to take possession. Now step aside and let us tow the truck. And right on cue, Karen herself marched up the driveway like a queen arriving to witness her loyal knights conquer new land. She wore her signature wide-brimmed sunglasses and her mouth was twisted in a grin far too satisfied for someone who had just sent two wannabe cops to steal a classic vehicle. There it is. She shrieked, pointing dramatically at the truck. That old rust bucket is an eyesore. Against HOA standards. Remove it, now. I crossed my arms. Karen, this is private property. You don't have any jurisdiction here. Oh, but they do, she snapped. I told them you were hiding the vehicle to avoid inspections. I know it's not registered with the HOA. That's because I'm not in the HOA, I repeated slowly, like I was teaching a toddler the alphabet. The taller fake officer ignored me and gestured to the driveway. Tow truck is on the way. You will step aside voluntarily, or we will take further action. Inside my pocket, I felt the familiar weight of my leather badge wallet. I wasn't just any truck enthusiast, I was a federal agent. But I didn't pull it out. Not yet. I wanted to see just how far this circus would go. The shorter cop huffed and waddled past me toward the garage lift like he had any real authority. "We need to inspect the VIN number for confiscation procedures." "You touch that truck," I said calmly, "and you'll be making the biggest mistake of your life." He scoffed. "Is that a threat?" "No," I replied. "That's a fact." But these guys weren't interested in facts. They were interested in impressing Karen, or maybe the HOA board that let them cosplay as law enforcement. Karen folded her arms. "This is happening with or without your cooperation. Next time learn to follow our community rules." I stared at her. "I don't live in your community." "That's what you think," she hissed. The taller officer cleared his throat dramatically. "By the power vested in the HOA Enforcement Division." I stopped him by raising a hand. That was enough. Absolutely enough. I stepped forward, calm and steady, and pulled the badge wallet from my pocket. The leather flipped open in a clean motion, revealing the unmistakable golden FBI emblem shining in the morning light. Both officers froze mid-breath. Karen's sunglasses slipped down her nose. "W8. What is that?" I held it up so all three could see it clearly. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The shorter fake officer turned pale. Oh no." The tall one swallowed hard, his entire act collapsing like a sandcastle in the rain. "We were just following HOA orders." "That's interesting," I said. "Because impersonating federal officers is a felony. And attempting to unlawfully seize private property is another." Karen stumbled back like she'd been hit by a wind gust. I didn't know. I thought, they told me, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to." "You three," I said, "are in very serious trouble." The tow truck approached in the distance, its engine rumbling closer. And for the first time that morning, it wasn't my truck getting hauled away. It was them. The next morning arrived with a thick gray fog settling over the neighborhood, the kind that made houses look like quiet silhouettes and every sound feel heavier. I stepped out onto my porch with a mug of coffee, expecting a calm start to the day. Instead, I froze mid-sip. 2 HOA security trucks, white, boxy, and proudly displaying the HOA logo like they were real law enforcement vehicles, were parked on my driveway. Not beside it, on it. Like they owned the concrete. 3 HOA officers stood around my vintage truck, the 1965 Ford F-100 I had spent years restoring. They circled it like vultures, pointing, whispering, and examining every inch of the chrome as if they were performing a military inspection. One of them even had a clipboard. My stomach tightened. I walked toward them. "Is there a reason you are trespassing on my property?" Officer Morris, the tall, mustached HOA enforcer who always seemed 2 seconds away from believing he was sheriff, turned to me with a smirk. "Morning, Mr. Carter. We received a complaint. This vehicle violates HOA aesthetic standards." "Standards," I repeated slowly, "that do not apply to me." Morris flipped a page on his clipboard like a man performing theater. "Classic vehicles require special approval. This one was not documented." I almost laughed. "You do not regulate my property. I am outside your HOA boundaries by several acres. You know this." He waved a dismissive hand. "The board reviewed maps. Turns out, your driveway technically rests within our neighborhood's visual influence zone." I blinked. Visual influence zone? That is not even a real term. He shrugged. "It is now." My patience snapped a little. "Move your trucks off my driveway and step away from my vehicle." You have exactly 10 seconds. But Morris crossed his arms, signaling to the other 2 officers. Begin the seizure. One officer pulled a wheel lock from the back of a truck. Another crouched near the front tire of my Ford. I stepped forward immediately. Touch my truck, and you will regret it. Suddenly, a new voice chimed in, a shrill, theatrical one I recognized instantly. Karen. In her robe, slippers, and messy bun, she marched down her driveway like she was leading a protest. Yes. Seize it. It is an eyesore. I said from the beginning that thing lowers property values. I stared at her. Good morning to you too. She pointed dramatically at me. Do your job, officers. The entire neighborhood is sick of looking at that rust bucket. It is not rusty, I muttered. It is restored. Flawlessly. Morris gestured toward the truck. We are removing it to the HOA impound lot. The board has approved it. I felt my jaw clench. An HOA impound lot? Karen clapped. Yes. Finally, someone is enforcing standards around here. Officer Daniels bent down again and reached for the tire. That was it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a calm, steady tone, the kind that made criminals rethink their life choices. Gentlemen. Before you make a mistake that will follow you for decades, listen to me very carefully. But Morris scoffed loudly. We do not take orders from you. You are a civilian. And as of right now, you are interfering with an HOA enforcement action. That is grounds for removal and potential arrest. Karen gasped dramatically. Arrest him. Arrest him. I exhaled, slow and deep. Then reached into my jacket. All movement stopped. All sound died. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath. I opened my wallet. There, clear as day, gleaming under the morning light. My FBI badge. Central Bureau. Federal jurisdiction. My name embossed beneath it. Officer Daniels dropped the wheel lock so fast it clattered across the concrete. Officer Price froze mid-step. Morris' clipboard slipped from his fingers entirely. Karen's mouth fell open so wide I wondered if she had dislocated it. I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke, calm but cold. Now that we understand who I am, let me clarify something for the record. Trespassing on federal property, because yes, my home qualifies under my jurisdiction, while attempting to unlawfully seize federal assets is a felony. Daniels swallowed hard. Federal? I nodded once. Federal. I stepped closer, my voice barely above a whisper. You will remove your trucks. You will step off my driveway. And you will never attempt to touch my vehicle again. Morris looked like he might cry. We were just following orders. Karen sputtered, pointing wildly. He is lying. HOA rules apply to everyone. Even government people. I slowly turned my eyes toward her. She stopped talking instantly. I continued speaking to the officers. You now have 5 seconds to leave before I contact the sheriff's office and let them handle this. They did not need 5 seconds. They scrambled to their trucks like panicked raccoons fleeing an oncoming car. Engines roared. Tires spun. They were gone down the street in under 10 seconds. Only Karen remained, trembling with rage and embarrassment. You cannot use government tricks to intimidate us. She snapped. You will hear from the board. I lifted the badge again. She squeaked. And ran. I watched her disappear into her house, slamming her door so hard the window shutters rattled. I exhaled finally, rubbing the bridge of my nose. War had officially begun. The courtroom was so silent you could hear the ceiling fan turning. Karen sat stiffly in the front row, her arms crossed, her expression the perfect blend of arrogance and impending doom. The two HOA officers, Greg and Martin, looked even worse. Their cheap uniforms were wrinkled, their badges noticeably absent today, and their faces pale. Meanwhile, I sat beside my actual FBI supervisor, Special Agent Ramirez, who gave me a reassuring nod. "Relax," he murmured. "This is just cleanup." Cleanup. That was a polite term for the monumental avalanche about to bury the fake HOA cops alive. The judge finally entered, a stern woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She took her seat, glanced down at the case file, and raised an eyebrow. "So," she said, her voice echoing, "let me see if I understand this correctly. The Homeowners Association claims they had the legal authority to seize the defendant's vintage truck." Karen immediately stood up, nearly tripping over her own heels. "Yes, Your Honor," she snapped. "He was violating the rules. He." The judge held up one hand, instantly shutting her down. I was not finished. Karen slunk down like a scolded child. The judge continued, flipping another page. "And this association apparently enforced these rules using two individuals dressed as law enforcement officers?" Her eyes lifted to Greg and Martin, who looked ready to dissolve into their chairs. "Yes, ma'am," Greg muttered. "But we were just trying to." "Silence," she said sharply. "You will speak when spoken to." Karen's face twisted. She hated not being the loudest voice in the room. Ramirez stood. "Your Honor, the Bureau would like to present evidence." He walked to the front with a small stack of documents and my truck's security cam footage. "We can confirm," Ramirez said, his voice clear and professional, "that the defendant is an active FBI agent. We can also confirm that these individuals," he gestured to the phony HOA cops, "impersonated law enforcement while attempting to illegally confiscate his property." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned back, unimpressed but disgusted. "Impersonating an officer is a felony," she said coldly. "A rather serious one." Karen shot to her feet again. "But they were doing it for me. I am the HOA president. It is not their fault, I told them to." All three men, including Greg and Martin, slowly turned to glare at her as if she had betrayed them, which she did. The judge blinked once. "So you are confessing to orchestrating this impersonation?" Karen froze, realizing too late she had buried herself. I mean, no, well, yes, but I thought." The judge slammed her gavel. "Enough." Ramirez switched on the video footage. The screen showed Greg and Martin approaching my truck, flashing fake badges, ordering me to surrender the vehicle, and then their reaction when I displayed mine. The courtroom burst into murmured reactions. Then came the part where Karen ran toward us shrieking that the HOA has power over everything. The judge's lips twitched in exasperated disbelief. When the video ended, she scribbled a few notes. "This is, frankly, one of the most ridiculous abuses of authority I have ever seen," she said. "And I have presided over cases involving ostrich smuggling." Laughter erupted from behind us. Karen's face turned beet red. The judge continued. "You three will be charged with impersonating officers, attempted vehicle theft, harassment, and intimidation." Greg looked ready to faint. Martin put his head in his hands. Karen stared at the judge like she had misheard. "What about him?" she snapped, pointing at me. "He intimidated us. He was aggressive." The judge didn't even glance up. "Ma'am, he was doing his job. You were committing crimes." Karen shrieked. "This is a conspiracy. An attack on the HOA. You cannot do this to me." "Oh, I absolutely can," the judge replied dryly. "Bailiffs." Two officers approached. Karen backed up, shaking her head violently. "No. No. Do not touch me. I am the HOA president. I have authority. The officers simply lifted her by her elbows and escorted her out as she kicked her legs like an angry toddler. The courtroom watched in stunned silence until the doors shut behind her and her screeching faded down the hallway. The judge turned to me. Mr. Walker, the court thanks you for your patience. Your truck is legally yours and will remain yours. The HOA will also face a full audit and restructuring. Translation. The HOA was about to get dismantled piece by piece. Outside, after the hearing, neighbors gathered around me. You really saved the whole neighborhood, one said. She has been terrorizing us for years, another added. I smiled tiredly. I just wanted them off my truck. My wife pulled me into a hug. At least it's finally over. Behind us, Greg and Martin were being loaded into a police van, Karen screaming from the back of another vehicle, still insisting she runs this community. I looked at Ramirez. You think she'll learn anything from this? He chuckled. Not a chance. But she won't be bothering you again. And just like that, the nightmare ended, not with revenge, not with violence, but with the truth on paper and Karen in handcuffs. My truck gleamed under the sun in the parking lot, untouched and stubbornly beautiful. Just the way it should have always been.